There's still a long way to go, but in 2026, representation feels more present than it ever has in the media we consume. Along with this shift, we've seen more progression in conversations surrounding mental health and neurodivergency. On Instagram and TikTok, ADHD feels ubiquitous. But does that extend to other media? How can ADHD feel like it's everywhere now, yet still be absolutely nowhere? To me, it feels like neurodivergent characters have dominated television since television was invented. I could list characters who I think have ADHD all day long. But as great as ADHD-coded characters are, as fun as it is to speculate online with other viewers and identify a really esoteric ADHD experience on screen, there's nothing like having an explicit confirmation that yes, that character was written to have ADHD, for it to be canon. The first character that immediately popped into my head was Percy Jackson. Rick Riordan wrote the Percy Jackson series for his 9-year-old son Haley, who was diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia, which largely contributed to his hatred of school and the physical act of reading. So Rick Riordan would read him bedtime stories out loud, specifically Greek myths, which Haley loved. When he ran out of stories, Haley asked him to make something up. And so he started writing the first Percy Jackson book, incorporating a world of Greek mythology and basing the eponymous protagonist off his son. In the series, ADHD and dyslexia are extremely common diagnoses among the demigods. It's explained that in the regular world, they have dyslexia because their brains are wired to naturally understand ancient Greek. ADHD symptoms, like impulsivity and being unable to sit still, are detrimental in a classroom, but on the battlefield are vital reflexes to keep them alive. Similarly, attention issues occur because their senses are stronger than mortals. For Half-Blood Percy Jackson, having ADHD is an asset. Rick Riordan told The Guardian, "There are so many other children out there like my son who are struggling with these issues and feel there is something wrong with them. And there's not. It's simply a different way of processing information." What's special about Percy Jackson's ADHD is that it's not just slapped on for a token mental disorder or mentioned offhandedly one time and then never brought up again. Percy's ADHD is an integral part of his character. It affects the plot of the story, his often impulsive and reckless decisions, and even his personality. Like most fictional portrayals of ADHD, Percy fits the characteristics of predominantly hyperactive impulsive presentation. So for context, if you don't know, ADHD used to be classified into types. You could be diagnosed as either the inattentive type, the hyperactive impulsive type, or a combined type of the two. But in 2013, the DSM-5 updated them into presentations. That just means at any given day they can change, based on developments or even just the context. I was diagnosed when I was 8, before presentations were introduced. But for me, my presentation changed depending on the context. At school, I was inattentive and would daydream, and at home, I was hyperactive and would fiddle with utensils at the dinner table. Percy's presentation, the hyperactive impulsive presentation, is more common in boys and men. And it's also flashier, which is partly why it's depicted disproportionately more often in media. Comparatively, girls and women with ADHD are more likely to fit the traits of inattentive presentation. This completely tracks with the character Annabeth, whose symptoms can fly under the radar because they're less flashy and more internal. She keeps her cabin stripped down to essentials because otherwise she will inevitably get distracted. Rick Riordan makes a conscious effort to show several different portrayals and symptoms. Annabeth hyper-focuses on projects and experiences time blindness. Meanwhile, Percy is impulsive and can seem like he's driven by a motor. Granted, there are valid criticisms of the series that I don't want to ignore. There's, of course, the demonization of medications, which, to be fair, was pretty par for the course for the time. But still not great. And then there's the toxic positivity, which is basically just some people not liking the fact that ADHD is treated as a superpower or a gift, which is fair. ADHD can be debilitating. On average, people with ADHD live significantly shorter lifespans and experience more physical and mental health problems. But on the other hand, this is a children's book that is ultimately aiming to destigmatize and make children not feel ashamed of their ADHD or dyslexia. So I don't know. Overall, as far as canonical representation goes, Percy Jackson is a solid, strong example. And then I thought, okay, who else? And then I hit a wall. When I first sat down to write this video, there were at least a dozen characters that I could come up with that I thought probably have ADHD, that seemed obvious to me as being ADHD coded. That was easy. But when it came time to name one that was actually confirmed on the page to have it, I genuinely could not think of another character outside of the Percy Jackson series. I couldn't believe it. I felt like SpongeBob trying to remember his name, so I googled it. And this is, well, it's already looking a little shorter than I would have thought, but here's one of the top lists I found online of characters who all canonically have ADHD. The problem is they don't. At the top, we have Barney from How I Met Your Mother. Here's the clip that put Barney on this list.
You were just like the worst student in the world, weren't you? They said I had AD something. Can we have class outside?
So that's it. 9 seasons, over 200 episodes, and this is the only time ADHD is mentioned in the entire series. I mean, not that it's even really fully mentioned here. Heavily implied? Yes. Canon? Well, it's kind of murky. Either way, if you have to watch the show 15 times to realize a character has ADHD, maybe the show's not doing enough to show the character has ADHD. Or maybe it was just a throwaway joke. Next on the list, Tracy Jordan from 30 Rock is pretty much the exact same situation. Mentioned once, also just the same joke. So 0 for 2, and out of 23 characters on that list, that's like almost 9%, so not a great start. Now granted, not every example on the list is a comedy. Stilinski from Teen Wolf is considered by fans to canonically have ADHD because he explicitly mentions taking Adderall. It's acknowledged offhandedly in a subtle way that I usually like.
How much Adderall have you had today? A lot? Doesn't matter. Okay, just listen.
The writers don't make it into this huge thing. It's just a casual, nonchalant depiction of a teenager taking medication without turning it into an after-school special, which on one hand is nice to see without demonizing it or sensationalizing it. And ordinarily, I'd say good writing is showing, not telling. In a character mentioning medication that is most commonly used to treat ADHD is solid showing that, hey, that character probably has ADHD. Nice, solid, move on. But that was before I really got into the thick of research for this video and realized just how dire the situation is. Because really, where are all the characters that have ADHD? Allegedly here. See, for many fans, mentioning the medication that is commonly used to treat ADHD is enough to legitimize the character's diagnosis. But the reality is, nowhere in Teen Wolf does Stiles or any other character acknowledge that he has it. ADHD, ADD, and attention deficit disorder never once appear in the show's dialogue. The same is true for Juno, who also makes this list. She mentions taking the medication, or in her case, abusing the medication, but never a diagnosis. It's not that Juno has to have ADHD, or that she isn't ADHD coded. I totally think she is. But medication alone does not automatically equate to ADHD. It's too much of a gray area. This alone can't make it canonical. For Juno, the mention of medication is played as a joke. But for Teen Wolf, the omission of ADHD feels almost deliberate. In 100 episodes, 42 minutes long by the way, for their most popular character, Teen Wolf really couldn't just throw out one line, one little, it's the ADHD. And again, show not tell, and that's great usually, but the context is everything. Because at the start of making this video, if I'd been able to name even 3 characters who canonically had ADHD, maybe I wouldn't care as much, but I couldn't, so I do. Before we can have subtext, we need there to actually be text. Now, obviously, there are some cases that don't apply. Richie Tozier from the It franchise might be the most unambiguously ADHD character I have ever seen. Like Percy Jackson, Richie fits the predominantly hyperactive, impulsive presentation. It's safe to say that Richie deeply struggles with self-regulation. One excerpt reads, "Richie's mouth was like a half-tamed horse that has a way of bolting for absolutely no reason at all. His friends even come up with a running gag. When Richie drags a joke out for too long, they say beep beep, in allusion to the Roadrunner, to let him know when he needs to rein it in. Richie is driven by hyperactivity and impulsivity, and it comes out in his poor conduct grades in school, and his willingness to put himself in danger without thinking, and in his often incredibly offensive character impressions. As a kid, he had been a goof-off, a sometimes vulgar, sometimes amusing comedian, because it was one way to get along without getting killed by kids like Henry Bowers, or going absolutely Looney Tunes with boredom and loneliness. He realized now that a lot of the problem had been his own mind, which was usually moving at a speed 10 or 20 times that of his classmates. They had thought him strange, weird, or even suicidal depending on the escapade in question, but maybe it had been a simple case of mental overdrive. If anything about being in constant mental overdrive was simple. The novel has several excerpts like this, and they're some of the most poignant descriptions of ADHD that I've ever read, though ADHD is never explicitly mentioned in the book. but it really couldn't have been. So the book is split in two separate timelines, set in 1957 and 1984, respectively. The 1957 timeline, when the characters are kids, is nearly 10 years before the DSM would recognize the term ADD, which was then called hyperkinetic reaction of childhood. The term would have been changed to ADD by the second timeline in 1984, but it wouldn't be extended to adults until 1994. Although ADHD is by no means a new condition, we've only known it as attention deficit disorder for a handful of decades. So for it, diagnosing Richie just wasn't plausible, but it is now. Yet despite how ubiquitous ADHD seems today, newer media seems to evade using the term directly. And maybe I'm too hung up on labels and terminology, but words matter. Take Percy Jackson, knowing that on the character's little wiki page, their ADHD isn't just listed as speculation or a fan theory, but that it's actually canonical, irrefutable, factual. Percy Jackson has ADHD. Period. He was written with ADHD in mind. ADHD informs his character. It really does make a difference. And though you can definitely see the traits throughout the story, how Percy is impulsive and restless and bad with deadlines, the books also don't shy away from using the actual language on the page. The actual acronym, ADHD, comes up 6 times within the first novel. And that is huge. I cannot stress how revolutionary this was for 2005. Hell, how revolutionary it is for now. And yeah, sometimes it's better to read between the lines. Sometimes it's nice for viewers to be able to draw their own conclusions and for things to be open to interpretation. But I was in middle school when I read The Lightning Thief, and seeing a character explicitly have ADHD, reading that word just 6 times, made a big enough of an impression on me that I could instantly recall it 15 years later. As a kid, already, it's exciting seeing a fictional character you like have the same challenges you have. But it's more than just you thinking Percy Jackson is cool. It's seeing all of your peers think Percy Jackson is cool. All of the kids who don't have ADHD and have their own preconceived notions of what it is. Those kids seeing that word in relation to a character that they like. That matters. I'd argue the label is more important for the people who don't have ADHD, because neurodivergent people can spot neurodivergent characters from a mile away. We don't need anyone to give us permission to see that. Like, as a kid, I was obsessed with SpongeBob. I went as him for Halloween until I grew out of the costume. And I didn't realize it at the time, but he was my ADHD icon. And I didn't know I had ADHD. I didn't even know what ADHD was. I just knew that there was something about that weird little yellow freak that I deeply resonated with. We don't need these characters to have the label to know we see ourselves in them. But it would be nice for the people who can't to see that label in those characters so they can see them in us too. I don't know, maybe this is a hot take, but there aren't enough characters on television who canonically have ADHD to be able to just hint at characters having it. And it's so obvious to the people who see themselves in these characters, but for whatever reason the writers won't just legitimize it by saying it out loud. What is this feeling? Am I watching the final season of Stranger Things right now? Because why do I feel like I'm being queer baited? One of the detriments of having ADHD is my never-ending struggle with appointments. Making them, keeping them, remembering them. I try to set them as early in the mornings as possible, otherwise I simply will not be able to focus on anything else for the rest of the day. I dread the physical act of calling a place to make an appointment, although that one might just be more of a generational thing. There's just something about calling a stranger on the phone that puts me on edge. The ringing itself is terrifying, but at the same time I'm also hoping they won't even pick up, which is ridiculously counterproductive. And when they actually do answer, my heart rate spikes and the sentence I was rehearsing in my head is gone, and I'm left stumbling and over-explaining and saying a lot. Let's just say I've never finished one of those calls feeling better about myself, which is exactly why I use today's sponsor, ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free website that helps you find and book high-quality in-network doctors, all based on your own preferences. You can search through the 200+ specialties offered on ZocDoc and see which doctors take your insurance and read reviews from real patients before deciding who feels like the right fit for you. They have over 150,000 providers across all 50 states, covering everything from primary care and dentistry to dermatology and eye care. You can book in-person or video visits, see real-time availability, and schedule instantly with no phone calls required. ZocDoc appointments also happen fast, usually within 24 to 72 hours of booking, so if you're like me, you don't even have time to forget. Stop waiting and start getting the care you need. Go to zocdoc.com/SloanStowe to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. When it comes to ADHD-coded characters, Jake Peralta from Brooklyn Nine-Nine is the name that seems to come up most frequently. He is ADHD-coded through and through.
You have a debilitating spending problem. You have 6 massage chairs.
Well, they don't make a massage couch.
You also purchased Olympus Has Fallen on demand 12 times. Was it a difficult movie for you to follow?
Nope, just watched it a lot.
He has characteristics that aren't medical symptoms of ADHD, but are heavily associated with it, like hyperfocusing for long periods, hyperfixating on niche interests, and experiencing rejection sensitivity. There are some things that are so specific they're startling, like he puts all of his mail in his bathtub.
Ooh, let's check the mail tab. Nope, no. See? It's impossible to find anything in here. It's not my fault.
That is one of the most ADHD things I've ever seen. But is Jake's ADHD canon in the show? No, it's never explicitly mentioned. ADHD, ADD, attention deficit disorder are never mentioned at all. Allegedly, there is an interview where the actor, Andy Samberg, said that his nephew with ADHD inspired his performance, and it is referenced frequently, but I can't find it anywhere. Despite this, or maybe partly because of this, speculation online is endless. There's a Twitter account and Tumblr blog dedicated to him having ADHD. People have made TikToks and YouTube videos dissecting his behavior and how it tracks with ADHD. Someone wrote G-rated fanfiction, where the entire plot is just his character dealing with undiagnosed ADHD. The people are yearning for a diagnosis. And the writers seem aware of this. In a 2018 Comic-Con panel, a fan asked the showrunner if there was any room for any mental health representation.
I think that, it's, we're always looking at every character and at every story and trying to be as inclusive and et cetera as we can be. And I think, that's something we've thought about. It took us a long time to figure out, for instance, the Rosa coming out story. And so sometimes it's easy to say, yes, but it's hard to actually come up with a story that feels satisfying or whatever for us. But we're excited also that people feel that representation, whether or not it's said out loud about Amy.
I would say one other thing to that, which is anytime we tackle something that is tricky like that maybe doesn't have a lot of representation, especially because we're a comedy, it has to be the right story. So we are walking the line correctly and it doesn't come across as us making a joke out of it and giving it proper respect. Those episodes take a lot longer because if you f*** it up, it's bad.
And this response makes sense, but in their attempts to carefully portray mental health, they leave ADHD explicitly out of the conversation entirely. And why wouldn't they? Canonizing ADHD is an unnecessary risk with little upside and a lot to lose, because if they portray it poorly and get it wrong, they could get such negative backlash. Anyone can deliberately write the character to have ADHD, but as long as they never diagnose them out loud, they're immune from portraying it insensitively. Those who resonate with the character's ADHD, great, but even if the writers write with ADHD in mind, as long as they never diagnose on screen, they can maintain plausible deniability. If they never say the word ADHD out loud, they never have to worry about portraying it poorly. But what does bad representation look like for ADHD? The worst stereotypical ADHD representation can be boiled down to 2 tropes. 1. Characters who are idiots, aka, as TV Tropes puts it, the ditz. The ditz is a character whose defining characteristic is profound stupidity or quirkiness. This includes Luke from Modern Family. This includes Jason from The Good Place. If 90% of the jokes play on the character being stupid or oblivious, please do not say they have ADHD. Phil from Modern Family is tough because he checks the oafish but lovable box. At the same time, he is portrayed to be competent and successful in his career. And this scene where he starts a task and continuously becomes distracted by a new task is one of the most accurate depictions of ADHD that I have ever seen. There is a 35% chance that at any point in the day I am doing some version of this. So, gray area. But it's safe to say, if there are Reddit posts ranking their dumbest moments, or if the go-to defense for their lack of intelligence is that they're smart in their own way, that's a pretty good sign that a character would serve as bad representation for ADHD. The second trope is a little more on the nose. Attention deficit, ooh, shiny. These are the jokes that play on distractibility. At the very least, confirmed ADHD characters like Tracy from 30 Rock or Barney from How I Met Your Mother should not be legitimized through one throwaway stereotypical joke. Do people with ADHD get distracted? Yes, but media that solely spreads these types of jokes just perpetuates the continued misunderstanding of what ADHD even is. And again, I don't want to spread misinformation. I am not an expert on ADHD. But Dr. Russell Barkley is. He has dedicated 50 years of his life studying ADHD and trying to get the public and the media to take it seriously.
I would want families to understand that there is more to ADHD than just the inhibition and these attention and working memory problems. That at its heart, in its soul, it is a disorder of self-regulation, not one of attention. I think the biggest problem we have had as a group in convincing the general public about the seriousness of our children's disorder versus autism or schizophrenia or the other disorders is the very name itself is trivial. ADHD. Just go to Starbucks. Good God. Have some caffeine. We got more serious fish to fry here in psychiatry than the fact that you just can't pay attention. Part of the reason that our disorder, that the name of this disorder, is so often pilloried in the media is because I think we misnamed it. This is a developmental disorder of self-regulation, not of attention. And that is a serious disorder, as serious as manic depression, and in its own way, as autism. But it doesn't convey that to people if they understand it only as ADHD.
ADHD is so much more than just getting distracted. My ADHD affects almost every part of my life, even down to my personality. Coincidentally, some of you guys have been wondering what my MBTI personality type is. So here it is. I am an ENFP, aka the campaigner. Wow, literally me. Some positive traits are being curious, perceptive, and enthusiastic. Negative traits include being unfocused and disorganized. You know what else is associated with those characteristics? What a coincidence. It's maybe not a coincidence that, fun fact, there are a ridiculous amount of fictional characters who are often characterized as being ADHD coded that also share this personality type. And it's easy to see how these traits align. Enthusiastic and energetic reads like hyperactivity. Spontaneous is just a friendlier word for impulsive. Perceptive could be a really nice spin on easily distracted. Now, obviously, I'm not saying everyone who identifies with this personality type has ADHD or that these characteristics cause ADHD, but it's hard to deny that there's an overlap. And yes, this is just a personality quiz. This website uses a different system and isn't even the official one you have to pay for, and even that one's not even fully scientifically backed, so take this all with a huge grain of salt. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't resonate with that type or see myself in those traits. This is all to say, to stress, really, the impact ADHD has on my life. It's not just a funny little quirk. It's intrinsically wrapped up in my identity, how I see myself and how I interact with the world. Sometimes I can't help but wonder how much of those characteristics are me and how much of them are just because of my mental disorder. Would I be who I am without it? I don't know. And I'll never know because there's no cure. But even when the character is intentionally written with ADHD, there can still be a reluctance to diagnose on screen. Ginny and Georgia is a serialized dramedy series on Netflix that focuses largely on mental health. One of the lead characters has anxiety, experiences panic attacks, and struggles with self-harm. The show is very conscientious with these topics, showing her gradually learn to embrace therapy where she learns coping mechanisms. And it's not just Ginny either. Other significant characters face EDs and clinical depression, and their storylines are treated with the same care. Ginny and Georgia is exactly the kind of show that does not shy away from labels. Except when it does. The character Maxine, who is Ginny's best friend, was heavily inspired by the series creator, Sarah Lampert's own relationship with ADHD. Taryn Ryder wrote, "Growing up, Lampert never understood certain compulsions and behaviors that affected her life. It wasn't until her 30s when she was diagnosed with ADHD and OCD that everything clicked. This revelation would later influence the character of Ginny's best friend, Maxine Baker, whose behavior, struggles, and dialogue have pieces of Lampert's own experiences." Now, I can't speak for the OCD, but I do think the way the show portrays Max's ADHD, specifically in the 3rd season, is very nuanced. Maxine as a character is outgoing and loud and bright. She wears her heart on her sleeve and she's confrontational with her emotions. Her impulsivity can push her to act immaturely or selfishly, which often negatively affects the people around her. Her character faced a lot of criticism by fans in the first 2 seasons for being a lot. The third season aims to explain why she is. The beginning of season 3, episode 9, gives context to Max's inner world by letting the audience follow her rapid-fire stream of consciousness. It shows what it feels like for someone with ADHD to jump back and forth through thoughts, to overthink situations and forget tasks. And it's a really well-done portrayal of a teenage girl dealing with undiagnosed ADHD. Of these scenes, Sarah Lampert said, "I knew that it would mean a lot to depict Maxine's inner thought process on screen. If we could get it right, I knew it would be powerful and others could connect to it. Max would make sense to them." But what makes it even more obvious that authenticity from the creator's own personal experiences were put into the show is how they approach the lesser-known aspects of the disorder. Over the course of the third season, we see Max's friends begin to drift away from her. Something that is often left out of the conversation surrounding ADHD is emotional dysregulation. According to Dr. Barkley, emotion has always been a core feature of ADHD. He lists emotional impulsiveness as a quickness to anger, to be easily excitable, to have low frustration tolerance, and displaying your emotions much more quickly than other people. Unlike mood disorders, which are characterized from feeling too much emotion, ADHD is a failure to regulate normal emotions. It is a self-regulation disorder. This facet of ADHD is why 50 to 70% of children are rejected by close friendships by second grade, and it heavily contributes to Max's gradual alienation from her friends, who struggle to deal with her directness and intensity. This underrepresented effect of ADHD is something that has rarely, if ever, been explored in media. It's an incredibly thoughtful and well-done depiction of what ADHD can look like, and it was heavily inspired by Sarah Lampert's own experiences. She said, "I was in my 30s when I was diagnosed with ADHD and OCD. Suddenly, so many aspects of my life clicked and made so much sense. I realized that this wasn't unique to me. So many people, especially women, aren't diagnosed until later in life. Women's mental health, like women's physical health, is criminally overlooked." But the series creator has no interest in giving Max a diagnosis. She goes on to say, "And to be honest, I'm not interested in diagnosing Maxine. She's young. She has a lot of growing up to do. She's got pieces of me, but she's not me. She's a combined effort of the other brilliant writers who work on this show and of the special sauce of Sarah Waistglass, who infuses Max with her own spin so that everything feels so very Max." This one is so flummoxing to me because she has first-hand experience with ADHD. This is not a creator who is interested in giving representation to a stigmatized group that she then has to, work very carefully to research and understand in order to provide an educated and respectful portrayal. She is in the stigmatized group. She automatically has perspective and a voice of authority because these are her lived experiences. She is aware that historically women have been diagnosed less, and she publicly acknowledges the epiphany that a diagnosis gave to her life, that it provided an explanation for the behavior she couldn't understand when she was a teenager. And she acknowledges the frustration of being diagnosed later in life. And yet, she is not interested in giving that same diagnosis to the character that was influenced by her own experiences that other young girls might also relate to and want to understand. And her reasons against diagnosing Max are, 1, she's young, as if all the teen characters aren't. 2, and she has a lot of growing up to do. Again, as if all the teen characters don't. And also, what does that mean? What is the implication there? That she has to reach some level of maturity before she's entitled to understanding why she is the way she is? And her final reason, she's got pieces of me, but she's not me. She's a combined effort of the other brilliant writers who work on the show and the actor. Again, as if there's a character on the show that isn't? As if every writer has to have the same diagnoses as the characters? If I sound frustrated and bitter, it's because I am. Look, the show isn't over yet, and I hope Sarah Lampert changes her mind because it is a missed opportunity. But I'm not gonna lie, reading this was very disheartening because it's like, even when the conditions are absolutely perfect, when it's not a procedural comedy and there's no risk of it being treated as a joke, but when it's a show that fully embraces therapy and mental health and diagnostic labels, and the person with the power fully understands the severity of the disorder, even when it is quite literally the best case scenario, there is still this hesitation to say ADHD out loud. It's infuriating. This cannot all fall on Rick Riordan's shoulders. That book came out over 20 years ago. In the last decade, we've seen a long overdue cultural shift in television to make room for representation in stories that haven't been heard. But in an attempt to evade portraying stigmatized groups disrespectfully, much of mainstream media has avoided addressing some of them entirely. And it's not just ADHD, but there are some obvious ways not to write ADHD. Don't make the character an idiot. Don't make the diagnosis a throwaway joke. Unless the story is set at a time before awareness, or in a world that doesn't use the same terminology, a creator tweeting a confirmation is just, it's not good enough. And I get that there are roadblocks, but writers are creative. If a character is undiagnosed, have another character just mention it. But mention it. Because in today's landscape, one of the worst ways to write a character with ADHD is to never say they have ADHD.